Hey guys, TJ from PC Gamer here with Chris Metzen, the Vice President of Story and Franchise Development at Blizzard Entertainment. We're here for the Heart of the Swarm launch event. So, Chris, kind of one of the things that defines Blizzard's stories, the stories you guys tell, is these kind of iconic, larger-than-life characters. Would you say with the big role Kerrigan's playing in Heart of the Swarm, is this the most character-focused story you guys have told?
I think so. I think ever, for all of our game products, this is the one that is most character focused. It's definitely about Kerrigan. It's definitely about her journey. Having been kind of this, cool human assassin, and she gets turned into the alien queen and back again. This chapter is really about for a girl that's been kind of used and abused and genetically modified, and has she ever really known who she is? And now that Raynor has bought her this chance at kind of freedom at the end of Wings of Liberty, this chapter is definitely about what will she choose to do with it. Will she choose to be happy? Will she choose vengeance? Will she choose to pull it together? And not be the sum of all her terrible experience. It's definitely where this one focuses.
Gotcha. So comparing it to past Blizzard products, if we look back to like Frozen Throne, which was Arthas' story, it was also kind of Illidan's story and Kael'thas' story. Who, other than Kerrigan, are like the big supporting players that are going to matter a lot in Heart of the Swarm?
Sure. I think Raynor definitely features, although he is clearly not the hero of this chapter. I guess I would argue at some meta level that Raynor's kind of, if there was one protagonist of the franchise, it's him, the one honest, roughed-up cop out there in the universe of compromise. So while Kerrigan is definitely the protagonist in this thing, we can probably bet that Mengsk is going to be in her crosshairs before too long. Zeratul shows up in a capacity that's maybe will surprise some folks. We saw him show up in Wings of Liberty, kind of working as this dark, mysterious Gandalf type character, telling Jim about prophecy and how important Kerrigan is. So players could expect to see a little bit more of that going on. Interestingly enough, with all the bad blood between him and Kerrigan. And then there's this whole new kind of pantheon of Zerg characters that the team created to kind of facilitate Kerrigan's story. One in particular is a character named Zagara, who's kind of a Zerg queen that was highly sentient. Kind of the idea that when Kerrigan was the Queen of Blades, she was trying to evolve the swarm over time and make it a little more free thinking, less drone-like organism. So Zagara is one of those queens that was really into the plan before Kerrigan got taken out, and what must she think of human Kerrigan now? And so there's a number of Zerg characters in that way that. What was the other guy? Dahaka is a very interesting character. I don't want to say too much about him. Yeah, there's a number of them that are really. It was weird this time around, right? In the first game and in Brood War, we had a couple Cerebrate characters. We had the Overmind that were full sentient characters that could prefer chocolate over vanilla and be conversant. But this time around, we really needed that supporting cast to run a lot deeper. So. It was a much more interesting kind of process of art designing Zerg characters that weren't the same old thing. It was like a talking Hydralisk or something like that. We wanted to push it a little further and really see where that art kit could go and where that character kit can go. So we're very happy with the supporting cast.
Do you find it really difficult to design these advisors kind of characters for the Zerg being as alien as they are?
It's a little more challenging, to figure out. From both, there's the visual aspect of it. Does their design, is it ultimately pleasing and challenging, and all the things that Zerg aesthetic should be? Do they, visibly look like their function within the swarm? Is this one a fighter? Is this one more of an administrator? Is this one more like a genetic scientist? And then finding voices for each of those characters and making sure that from the writing all the way to the actor in the studio that there's an integrity behind the character. Because it's so exotic and they're so whack, right? It's hard to, it's kind of like a moving target. But I think we really hit it with these characters. I think their personalities really come forward, and they're all very complimentary.
Gotcha. So Heart of the Swarm, it's the middle part of kind of the first big planned trilogy you guys have done, and it's kind of an awkward position in some franchises. It's the best entry, and others not so much. What role does Heart of the Swarm play, kind of sitting where it is, and what would you compare it to?
The StarCraft 2 event.
Right, right.
I mean, Heart of the Swarm is definitely the dark Empire Strikes Back, middle chapter. Wings was an interesting story. It set out to be, the story of revolution. Raynor versus Mengsk, and of course the Zerg come in and screw everything up. And really, Wings it takes a hard left turn right in the middle of the story, where it's possible that this guy could get his girlfriend back, and he practically drops all else. Yes, that's what we're doing. Oh, it'll save a lot of people.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
and his buddies call him out like, really, we're going to risk all these guys over getting this girl back. But that's what Jim does, and that event and that fact of turning into a human again will have serious, reverberations, especially when you line that up against Zeratul suggestion in the first chapter in Wings of Liberty that this girl is everything. She's the turn point of history. That ultimately there's some check in the mail. It's going to get cashed one day, and it's going to be bad for everybody if this girl isn't there to make the difference. That maybe it was more than just the Overmind's plan to assimilate her. Maybe it had, more, kind of further, reaching reasons to bring her into the swarm. And all of this speaks of a much grander mythology that Wings just kind of began to tease. That honestly, ultimately will result in Legacy of the Void. That's why it's called that.
Right.
It's like the whole thing comes, back around again. So for this chapter, it is kind of a dark middle chapter, and the third one's fairly dark too. But there's a 300 component to the third one where the mighty rise and start pushing back against the shadow. In this middle chapter, it's a little more morally ambiguous, and it's definitely focused on, at its heart, pardon the pun, the innate identity that Sarah holds. What does she think of herself? Has she always just reacted to people's manipulations of her? Has she ever really had a strong core in there? And in many ways, this is a story of her finding that core and choosing the vector of her life and choosing what she will become and ultimately what she wants to be in the universe. And obviously, at the end of Heart of the Swarm, her story does not end. She and Raynor will also play, a role in the chapters to come, or chapter to come. But it's definitely about her, and it's definitely about all the unrequited feelings with Jim and all the the kind of big Gone with the Wind love story thing that's run through StarCraft since the first one. This is really where a lot of that resolves for good or ill.
Gotcha. So if we think about, just game storytelling as a medium, in relation to other stuff, it's kind of still in its infancy a little bit. What do you guys see as, or what do you specifically see as how you guys have evolved in the way you tell stories with games since Wings of Liberty, since even back to the original StarCraft, and how have you applied that to Heart of the Swarm?
It's a really good question. When we, I was about to say when we were younger, back in the day, we had built Warcraft 2, and the only way you could tell the story is by scrolling a wall of text and hoping that somebody out there would go, oh, I think I get it.
I got it.
For the record, you're the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was frustrating back in the day because it was all so crude and we didn't know what our expectations were. And we're a shop that's designed first. And there's always the argument of like, I don't want to sit there through a bunch of exposition. I don't care what this character thinks. I don't want to, I don't want to have to click 5 buttons. Just get me back into the mission, right? It's about a video game. Lost Vikings. Go, go, go. And I'm going, no, I think they'll care. If we build it, they will come. Yeah. And having come through, Warcraft 3, we tried a much more cinematic take on things. It had these really nice glue screens and cinematic sequences that wove the whole story together. So we tried a much bigger story on Warcraft 3. And while I love Warcraft 3, there's times where it was a little too top-heavy when your story's so woven in and out of all the gameplay, and the gameplay has to change all the way up until you ship the game to make, to optimize levels and make it fun. It can be really, really top-heavy to tell that much story. So when we decided to build StarCraft 2, there was kind of the suggestion of like, well, what if we tried to pull the story a little bit more out of the maps and just let the level design be what it is and just facilitate really fun maps. and really had the story rest in a different kind of space. And so kind of like that old school Wing Commander idea that we would build kind of sets and be able to move from this set to that and small talk with people, develop relationships, click on little photographs on a Post-it board, and be able to kind of just explore a little bit more of the ship and the universe ultimately. And so I loved that experiment with Wings of Liberty. I loved that it kind of had more texture, more deeper characters, deeper points of interaction. I think over time, we're getting better at this stuff. We're still learning. We learn every time out. Kind of the do's and don'ts, what facilitates gameplay or what feels cumbersome to gameplay. There's still, a lot of people have allergic reactions. If you're going to go play a certain type of game that's hugely cinematic, well, that's why you buy it off the shelf in the first place. But our games, people tend to want to get back into the action very, very quickly. And so a lot of cinematic content or a lot of story context can become very cumbersome very quickly. So that's something, but I've got these big stories to tell. I got this beat, and it's going to be wonderful, and you're all going to get it. Like, oh, man, it's so we tend to be very iterative on that kind of stuff and how the story's coming off. So we constantly learn more and more about that process. And for Heart of the Swarm specifically, we pulled back a little bit, all the little points of interactivity, just to streamline the flow of story as much as possible, so that you had fewer buttons to click to jump straight back into your next mission. That was really something we wanted to really reinforce this time around.
Where would you like to see it go, in Legacy of the Void and beyond, the next level of telling story with games, I guess?
It's hard to say. It's just because I don't know if I could hit it broadly. Broadly, I would say, look how far we've come. There's shops out there doing just amazing story work in video games, from the BioWares to the Rockstars. I mean, I played a couple games the last couple of years that I'm just utterly immersed. So as an industry, for all of our shops, I think we're getting better. I think we're finding our voice. We're finding more, resonant themes to chase. It's not just, rock 'em, chop 'em, big balls action. That's fun, but. I think we're getting into a space where our storytelling is becoming more nuanced. Obviously, we're not at a Hollywood level yet, but that's an interesting bit too. It's like we have to have the discipline not to run towards Hollywood, right? Movies are movies, and you go to film, and it's 100 years of film, right? So we know that that's an exact science at this point. But the thing about games is that it's not a film. It's a voluntary process of hand-eye, rapid response and direct player control. And so sometimes you have to weigh the storytelling, even though we can run very deep with things, or even though we can, construct and tell very nuanced scenes. You have to remember that the whole reason the person picked the product up off the shelf in the first place is because they wanted to drive it. They wanted to feel like the center of events. They want to feel like they are the agent of change in whatever world they're stepping into. And so sometimes that actually can run counter to your genius. I got this scene, man, it's going to be wonderful. And well, how does that feel though? So I don't know where it all goes. I like that we're leveling up, but you kind of have to stop and remember that the media type, you need to stay off the player's toes, and you need to always keep in mind that the player wants to feel like the center of events. And if the story starts chipping away at that, you could find yourself out of balance very quickly.
Gotcha. So I think you might be the only person that can answer this. Very important question here. So Jim Raynor, Thrall, and the Ghost of Zoltan Kulle walk into an Outback steakhouse. What do they order and why?
The Ghost of Zoltan Kulle orders chicken McNuggets because he's a dick. Just to screw with the waiter. Raynor would order the filet because he's been eating, combat rations out of a can for the last 2 years. You can see it stained on his shirt. So he's gonna go for the steak, and he's gonna have Jack on the Rocks, and then he's probably not gonna get steak again for a very long time. But Thrall. Oof. You'd have to order like 6 sampler platters because orcs can put it away.
Yeah.
You got to feed that boy. I think he goes through some food. I don't know. I want to say he'd drink milk, but I don't don't think so.
Don't peg him as that type either.
I think he'd eat the whole place out of food is what I think.
Probably.
I don't think he'd be super discerning either.
No, I can definitely buy that. So as kind of a final question, you teased a little bit earlier, Legacy of the Void, you said it's going to have kind of a 300 sort of desperate feel. Anything else you can tell us about maybe what to expect, since by the time this video goes up, I'm sure there will be people who in our community who have already beaten Heart of the Swarm on Brutal. So, yeah.
What could I tease about Legacy of the Void? An ancient cycle will complete its course. There will be much blood and darkness, but there will be impossible acts of valor and heroism. And you will see the Protoss unleashed. It will be a thing of mightiness.
Thing of mightiness. Sounds excellent. Chris Metzen, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, pcgamer.com, or youtube.com/pcgamer, for more interviews like this, more videos every week, and we'll see you guys around.